Hey, Munchkin Cat here, and I wanted to go over this track I've been working on that uses the Deathpack Nemesis stems that were from the track that was recently released, and an unreleased track that was shared out. So, a couple things before diving in. What my intentions were when I saw these stems was to create something completely different from whatever it was. And there was a couple things I did to sort of make that work out. One of those being that I would do like a randomizer for the key. You can just Google like random key generator, and I ended up getting with G minor. You can do like a random generator for moods. And then this, I got more of like a ethereal kind of vibe. So that was the mindset I had going into it. And then secondly, personally, I like to create like a general motif, either like a combination of drums and a bass line or an idea, and then start adding different parts from the stems to see what would come up. And the other thing I like to avoid is in electronic music, I'm really not a big fan of cheesy vocals. So there are vocals in this, and I wanted to convey it in a way that sounded unique or different or weird. I definitely used a lot of techniques that I picked up from music that Bowie used to was singing in. Um, so yeah, let's get into this. I'll start from the very beginning, and I'll try and go through some of the ideas that I came up with. Um, in this project, there's really not too much as far as plugins. It's mostly stock Ableton stuff, but there is Little Alter Boy, some Fab Filter. There's an isotope I use on the master for total balance that allows you to sort of get a use as a reference to what you're trying to go for. And I think aside from that, I can't think of anything else. If it comes up, I'll mention it. Yeah. So originally, when I started this, I'll just kind of go with the motif I had. I basically just came up with a drum loop, pretty standard. I was like, okay, I want to do something that's like halftime of drum and bass. So I started with this, and that was double time, so I halved it. Um, Putting it at 70 BPM. And then with the rest of the percussion, um, this including a little bit of Foley's, stuff like that, a little texture. And then I added a bass line over top of it. So it was like. Yeah, so that was kind of like the general idea that I had. I started with just like drums and bass. A lot of times, personally, I like to think of that as how I come up with more ideas and start adding on and going through my samples or trying different melody lines. Um, and so in this case, I took it from there, and then I was like, okay, let me take the vocals, let me take the drums, let's take these samples. So what I did is I took the kick and the snare from the Nemesis stems because that was closer to the key I was going for. So if I was to go to the kick here, let's get an EQ, Control F, just type EQ. And this is just on the kick, right? So let's solo the drum and the kick. And then we'll pull this up, and you can see. So in the bottom left over here, it shows the key on the EQ. So the lowest transient was the closest to the key that I was doing it in. And so that's the reason why I decided to take the Nemesis kick. And I figured since that and the snare were already kind of like made together, then it would have been ideal to sort of keep that consistency. And then I also created my own kicks that can switch between using this knob. And then same thing with the snares. I have like different types and also different filter types. A lot of times with my own snares, I like to add like a shifter. So you could do like you can do two different shifters, and you can map that to this modulator here, and basically essentially set it up to where you can shift between two shifters or whatever effects that you want. And then the other sample, I think that might be pretty prominent in this, is the vocals. So I took the vocals and I kind of cut up specific spots I really liked, that I thought I could make work, and then added all sorts of weird effects. So I'm going to kind of like go through the beginning and then sort of explain it by parts, I think. The vocals are taken. Originally, I took the piano from it up here, and then I was like, it just sounded way too like in your face. Like I feel like if a lot of people were to use it, they would add the piano with it, and I wanted to not do that. I wanted to do something that was completely different, as different as I could possibly make it, and so I didn't keep the piano. Instead, what I did is I started with this like really weird bass that has texture built into it. It's actually a sample I found and I quite liked. I put rhythm I liked. And I added a sub below it. So there's two, I have my pitching sub here and my regular sub here. And so the pitching sub is essentially going like dropping and coming back up. If I go to envelopes and move to the MIDI controller, you can see it kind of just like, it's actually solo just that. So by itself, it doesn't sound great, but like together, it sounds more like you're moving into something interesting, like something different. Like, what is this? It's like ominous. And then one of the other things, speaking of ominous, is I love dissonant sounds. So once it starts moving to this part, we have the main vocals, which I have pitched to the key, five semitones. And then I have the original vocals, which is like slightly less. So it sounds in key, like chord wise, like the notes, but it feels dissonant because they're kind of like slightly spread apart because it's not exactly on key. And that was kind of like the idea is I wanted it to sound spooky almost, or like weird, or like ethereal, right? So that was the goal, is to start it like that. So after I made this motif over here, several motifs really, I kind of started thinking of a plan and like mix and matching different things until I figured something that got into it in a nice way. And you can use a lot of your intros into your breaks as well, so you can kind of like divide and figure out how that works out. So in this case, those two pieces I feel help fit in, and then the drums are like quiet. If we look at the drum bus here, I have this kind of like going on with an LFO attached to the EQ on the frequency. It's just like going. It's basically going like this, right? So it's trying to really raise the transients on the high end of the drums, while a filter is gradually like opening up on a both pass. So you can control that by the depth of it. The rate is how often it happens, and And then you have the next part, which we get closer to like or like getting into the build, right? The drums start coming out a little bit more. All the filters are gone, uh, and the vocals are no longer filtered as well. Um, and we're saying, hey, this is the song, right? So you'll notice here the sub stops playing. So it's like there's all this noise. So it's like saying, hey, this is a song. It's going to come where these are the vocals. This is going to be the hook. And the drums are saying, hey, I'm here, there's a little bit more. I think there's a shaker, right? Yeah, there's a shaker that comes in, crash, and then the sub, right? And it's not like everything, but it's a lot, right? So you're covering so many different frequencies. And then it drops off here to say, hey, there's gonna be a build coming soon. There's gonna be something coming. It's like some sort of like we need to like drop off and be like, hey, let's relax for a second, and then we're gonna get fucking into it. So So I feel like this build is pretty standard. It's like there's nothing special going on in this build. I thought about trying to make it a little bit unique, but instead I decided to do something a little silly with the vocals during the break. Um, I wanted it to be obvious. I wanted the listener to be used to what a normal drop would sound like. So um, I don't use the side chain for this section. I do something else. It's a little weird. But this is where all the sidechain happens, is in this drum meet right here. And then I have a separate build rack for this one has both claps and kicks, and this one's just a snare. And this snare has like a shifter combo, filter combo. So by itself, I guess I'll just do it. Honestly, you could have put anything here. This Reese, I just love putting Reeses and pitching the reaches all over the place. So this is kind of what it looks like with the envelopes. Like you have this guy, and you have all of this. The one thing that is probably outside of like some sort of weirdness. So I put an auto pan to sort of make a pretend sidechain essentially. So you can see like the rate, and I do this on the Reese, and I think also the snare build. Uh, so if I open up the automation for a second, let's look at the rate. There you go. You can see like it follows the kick. So the first part is sixteenths. It's like da 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 or whatever. I'm sorry, da 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 da, right? And then it gradually increases to 30 seconds. And this actually happens to a couple other instruments over here when I do another break build. The reason for that is because it's like a different tone for this like kick. I also have like different velocity. So typically for most kicks, for most percussion, I put all my velocity down to 0. But for this, I put it to 70 so I can sort of choose, gradually build it up. You could probably just use a utility is fine. I just wanted to try things a little bit differently. I don't normally do that, but I kind of like it. So the other thing I should say is, so when you phase the auto pan, um, you're making it so it's not like going left, right, left, right. You're just kind of like more. You're doing the same. You're doing not the same thing as a sidechain, but something similar to a sidechain where it dips in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. So that was kind of that's why I was calling it like the fake sidechain. Cool. Yeah, so vocal wise, not a lot going on. It's taking up a lot of space because there's delay, there's echo actually. And I'm using Soothe 2, which is a nice, that's the effect I forgot. Soothe 2, which is nice. It's really good for getting rid of like really difficult to find, like if there's like artifacts that you are hearing, essentially, it helps smooth it out. It makes it a little bit easier. Um, but I think through this whole section, like I would love to get into like all of this shit that I have going on. For the bass, so there's several different basses I got going on here. Um, which this is actually less than I normally have. Sometimes I have up to like 20 different basses. This is what? Well, I guess this 15. I guess that's fine. Um, but this is a combination of like wubs, donks, harmonics. I have one part where I used the Nemesis bass. There's actually a couple harmonic basses. It's just usually like you can like mess with the highs a little bit more. And then there's these, I love using cone sounds samples as like sort of in betweens because it has so much texture to them. And you can just add more, as you can see here, like in my effects chain, like I just added, I just EQ'd it and added like OTT, control the sides, whoops, whatever. So like this, right? Which is a nice transition to parts, I think, without it. And then also, I actually used a couple effects from, so in Phaseplant, recently Mr.Bill released or Phaseplant Kilohertz. Regardless, they collaborated on a new sample pack, and I got it recently. And it was like $15, and there's some pretty good stuff in here. Like, look at all this shit; it's crazy. But it has a combination of like stuff from Deathpath, Multiband, and Phaseplant, and so I think this one here, which I use as like passing notes. Which the whole point of that was just kind of like for you to kind of hear it in the back so that everything else would be up front or in the mids. So like you're like doo-doo and it's like, eh. Also this donk, I think is his. Yeah. So I have a couple of my own donks, but I was like, yeah, let's do something different. I don't want to always use my own donks. So I tried his, and his is like a big, it's a big donk. And I think there's definitely some different. So it's like, They have both donks and other things. It's actually the only donk I've ever used that also has really good legato chords. That said, also one of the things I like to do is, so if I took this for example, right? I'll just make a new track. I'm going to Control F, phase plant, and then get that in here. I'm going to move this over here, and let's get this. The God mode's the name of the pack. It was like a donk, right? Something like that. Oops. Yeah. So you have all these knobs, right? But like instead of like automate it from here, what you can do is you can configure it, right? So click configure, open up this triangle here, this caret, I think is what's called, and then you just start clicking. You can do the mod wheel if you want. You can do all of this, right? So we're doing all of it. Why not? Unclick the configure, Control G while you have it on, and then open up the macros, and then just start setting these macros around. Whatever makes sense. And also you can like also color code them if you are like, oh, these are the two I like to use the most. I barely like to use this one or whatever. And then additionally, like maybe you can go to MIDI mapping and you'd be like, there's an amount that I never want to reach. So you can specify like, maybe I don't want the filter to ever go beyond 50%, whatever that might be. You'd have to open it up to kind of see what that is. And then let's see, that's the filter, right? So so you can pull this all the way up. So like, yeah, see how this is going up over here? You're like, I never want it to go beyond that. And there you have it. And you can just unclose the map and you're like, okay, cool. That's that. And that's how I like to set up all of my racks. As I'm going on, once I kind of like figure out, I'm like, oh, I like this sound. Let me make sure after playing around with different knobs and stuff, I'll be like, okay, let me group this and start actually fucking around with it. And I think it was really like, man, it's fun. I used like 3 different presets that Mr. Bill used. And that was 2, right? And this is the 3rd one. Hold up. It's cool. I like these. They're fun. Disperse is great, by the way. So yeah, that's the bass section. That's pretty much gonna like occupy the whole conversation of the bass throughout the entire track. And as far as drums go, the most effort that goes into the drums is like the elbow grease you put into making it sound the right way. That and the fills combined with all this other percussion and foley's and cymbals, which is like a whole different conversation. But yeah, I mean, drums are the most important piece, which is why I like to really start off with a good set of drums and then just kind of make up after that. But sometimes you have like a really nice idea in your head, like a bass line or a melody line. You want to put that down, that's fine. But I feel like if you have good drums, then that's great. Yeah, so let's continue on to the second verse. Right. So again, not too much in the vocal section, like as far as automation is concerned. I guess one thing I should say is in Little Altar Boy, Slink mentioned that when using a Little Altar Boy, there's some like width issues of left right. So this utility is set to left, and then there's a widener set to 200%. And then you use the mid sides to kind of like, close out anything that's below 100. And that makes it more centered, at least where it needs to be. The effects, it's coming in and out. This is pretty standard stuff, like just coming in and out with different noises and more higher frequencies. I have the side chains set to a higher threshold. Typically with other instruments, I just keep it at infinite. But for this, it just gives it more time to pull in. Especially with it being like more, it's effects, right? So they're supposed to be, they don't have to be like in your face. They're supposed to be sitting in the back anyway. So, yeah, let's get into the break because this is going to be kind of fun to me. Yeah, so for this guy right here, this is a technique I learned from Slink a couple of years ago. He has like a whole video on the echo, where essentially you group it, right, and then you can map it and set the specifics of how much or little you want, right? So both the delays are set to a minimum of 3 milliseconds and a maximum of 107 milliseconds. I got the 107 milliseconds based off a single beat. Whoops. So if you highlight a certain area and you hover over it, you can see in the bottom left, it says 214 here. And this is essentially a half note. So I wanted to set it to a quarter note. Then there's the rate. So I wanted the rate with the time to go up and down about like a similar rate to make it sound interesting, I guess. You can kind of play around with it. So in this case, I have 1/64 to a half. And then in doing that, when the time is really close together at a quicker, so if you're doing 1/64 at the quickest time, you get that sort of sound that we heard over here. So that is going to, the sound, it basically is like layering a vocal on top of each other, but they're slightly behind. And it makes it sound like really weird, interesting, in my opinion. This is something that Bowie has done, or at least like actually, I think it was also a combination of Tony Visconti technique with like layering vocals in a way through delay, so it sounds slightly quieter but on top of each other, but just slightly behind. And it's a cool sound. And then of course, then there's like the other automation with it increasing the time and the rate, which allows it to kind of, I call it the echo crunch, because to me, in my mind, that's what makes sense, is it's crunching itself. But whatever word you want to use for it. During this build, there's also some high stuff going on, which reminds me, there's like a polyrhythm thing going on. So there's like a lead that's following the sub, and then there's a sort of arpeggiator. Well, it is an arpeggiator. And then there's like these sort of trickled in effects, sounds, notes. And that's kind of like this whole section is a break, right? We all know what a break is. It's like, hey, let's relax, kind of like listen to all this weird other shit that's going on. No longer is there any bass in your face anymore. And then the next section is actually a sample um, that I took from Black Octopus. I think this is a Defunk sample, which I thought was really cool because it's like it felt really driving, which kind of like created the idea when I threw it on. It's like, oh shit, okay, this is driving, so let me just put this fucking clap and bass um, and other stuff on, so it'd be like kind of like really build into the drop. But the other thing I should say before I get into this is like I also was trying to create with this idea like a lot of times when I do drops, it's like everything's in your face on the drop. So I wanted to be more reserved on this drop. So despite the fact that it has a really strong build, I wanted it to be like ease in to the final. Yeah, so uh, yeah, honestly, like I think I only really used it was just really that vocal sample um, that was used from those stems. The kick, I modified the kicks in a way that it doesn't really sound like the starting kick at all anymore. If you do things like put it in a simpler and you can modify the envelopes for the volume and for uh, the tone, the pitch, um, then then things start to change a lot. And I had to do that because the original kick was too thick, too the tail was a bit too big for what I wanted anyway. So yeah, I thought this is a cool little take on something somebody else's does and doing it in a way that doesn't sound anywhere near like the original, which I think is important, at least to me, when doing, even back when I used to play like in rock bands, like when we did covers, I never wanted it to sound like the same song. I wanted it to sound unique, but have references or like a call out to the artists who originally did it. Um, and I mean, to be honest, I don't even know if this vocal stem is actually somebody that was recorded or who's actually a sample. But yeah, it was fun, and I was really happy with how my sound design worked out in the space. I was pretty happy with the build, and I was pretty happy with how the effects turned out on the vocals. It sounded very interesting to me. Um, it's not clean, it's not pretty, but that's how I like it. I don't want it to be. I want it to be weird, and I think, at least I feel that I accomplished that, and it was fun. So yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful.